Good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to see your beautiful eyes. Welcome. My name is Jenny Eckstein. I am a senior software engineer and an open source contributor. This is my first time speaking at OpenJS and the first time speaking in person at the conference. So I'm very much looking forward to sharing my project with you. First, I would like to essentially poll the audience. How many of you, and if you don't mind raising your hands, is a frequent open source contributor? Okay, very nice. Thank you for your contributions and for your work. The software engineering wouldn't be the same without you. And how many of you have contributed to open source, even once? Very nice. Thank you. Thank you for your contributions. You help a lot the frequent contributors, and I will tell you more about it. And how many of you have never contributed, but looking forward to try or start or exploring what they can do in open source? Very nice. Thank you. Okay, so today I'm going to tell you about my first open source project. I am a recent open source contributor, and I would like to share with you my story and the open source lessons I have learned and the project I have built. So let me start with a story. Many of us who have started coding at some point discovered coding. How does it usually start? For me, it started on YouTube. I saw how you can write code, and I was very curious. And once I have discovered what I can do with code, I was amazed. It's like a Lego I can build a Legoland out of. So most stories go like this. Can everyone hear me well? Okay, perfect. So how most stories go, you discover programming and you want to build everything at once. You get so excited, you build a front end, you build a back end, and then you discover cloud and you integrate cloud. And let's say in our case, it's AWS. You go on AWS, you sign up, you get your account, you put in your credit card, and you begin the work. And you build your application, you write some unit tests, everything works, and you feel so empowered with everything you can build. You discover SQS, and you build a queue, and you see that you can send messages, you can receive messages, and you decide to automate. You learn about unit testing, and you write tests, and you automate them on every code change. Your tests run, everything succeeds. You feel so proud of yourself, of everything you build and everything you can build. You can see that programming gig coming up in your future at the dream job you wish you will have, or a freelance if that's where you're trying to go. You go to sleep, you dream of all the great opportunities you are going to see, and then what can happen? You wake up in the morning and you see an $8,000 bill from AWS. That is a real tweet. It didn't happen to me, didn't happen to anyone I knew, but it did. Someone I did mentor who did go through a boot camp did mention that they did sign to AWS and did not know of any other options and started seeing charges come on their credit card. So this is a real story. So what's the solution? Many of you probably know that there is a solution. The solution is localstack, right? So how does localstack work? You essentially write code like you would for AWS, but you substitute the AWS with localstack, where you run when the fake server runs and pretends it's a real server. So you talk like you would to real AWS, but you don't get billed. Essentially, it saves money, especially at the development time. So localstack is great, and it's fantastic for large-scale applications, and it saves a lot of people a lot of time and money. But there are a few challenges with localstack. It has about 3 pages of configurations, a lot of requirements, and generally a challenge to get started with very quickly. So what are some other solutions? So I have built SQSLite, which is a mock server for SQS, AWS SQS. And why SQSLite? Essentially, there are already 3 similar products on the market in open source, DynaLite, KinesaLite, and Server. And now we have SQSLite. And I'm so proud of that animation. So why SQSLite? Essentially, SQSLite is an NPM module that is written in pure Node.js. It is open source. It saves you costs, just like localstack. It's very lightweight. You can use it as a node module. You can integrate it into a unit test. You can run it as a CLI tool. And we have replaced our standard mocking unit test for SQS and have seen a very, it's proved very successful. It's definitely improved our unit testing. So, I'm sorry. I just want to show you that it's 99.9% JavaScript. Okay, so SQSLite. How would you actually develop in it? And I will walk you through the code. I conveniently put line numbers so you can follow along with me. So if you have ever built with anything with AWS SDK, you import AWS SDK on line 2. You also import SQSLite because that's what we're going to use for our server in this case. On line 13, you instantiate SQS and you pass that endpoint that says localstack. And what that does is it sends the input to AWS but redirects it to your local machine. So your inputs are the same as you would send to AWS. AWS actually does validations, but it doesn't run the processing time, therefore it runs as a mock server. It doesn't charge you money, and it imitates the behavior exactly as you would expect in SQSLite. And you get the response exactly the same as you would get from AWS SQS. So passing that local host, passing that local host gives us a fake server, and then line 17, we start that server, so we run that function line 4 to line 11, which starts a server. It passes some parameters like log or false. It uses Fastify under the hood, so anything you would pass on into the Fastify, you can pass into SQSLite. You listen on port, your server is running, and then line 19 through line 32, essentially you perform the same operations you would for SQS. You create queue, you send message, you receive message, and this is some output you can get. So your output, if you were to see it in the command line, looks exactly the same as it would if you talk to real AWS. What's the great benefit is that when you're done with development, essentially you can just remove that endpoint parameter on line 13 and you would go straight to AWS. So it's almost like a flag flip. You can also use SQSLite in your unit tests. And here I have an example with Jest, where you have also import an AWS SDK, you import SQSLite, you create some localhost endpoint, and in the before all, you instantiate SQSLite with that endpoint to run on a localhost on line 17. And then line 27 to line 30, you get to write your unit test and you can assert for the same output. Remember to write your unit test to 100%. You can also use SQSLite as a CLI tool. and you will write the same way as you would write with AWS. Essentially, you also pass the endpoint parameter, which redirects you to your local server. And the input and the output will look exactly the same. So we have 3 ways to use it. Use it as a server, use it in unit tests, use it as a CLI, and the rest is up to your imagination. So that was my product, and that was my first big contribution to open source, and I'm very proud of it. And when I started the open source, I didn't really know what I was getting into, and I would like to share with you the 7 lessons I have learned while building in open source. So, first lesson. If you want to become an open source contributor, that is fantastic. I very much encourage you to do that. You will learn so much, and I learned so much, and I'm very happy that I have gone through this path. However, releasing something into open source is essentially giving it to the world without having the ability to really take it back. With great power comes great responsibility. Your code might run in small application, in enterprise application, be a building block to a very popular software, and it would be your responsibility to maintain that software. Engineers that use your product will not be happy if the product is abandoned or if the product is not maintained to a certain quality. I have seen throughout my career many libraries not being maintained and had to go through the effort of switching and finding a different solution. That is part of reality of open source. So my suggestion when you start an open source project is to have someone else help you. Don't think you can do everything by yourself. You can try, but it is hard. No one always has the time, and you always want to have the next of kin in your open source project to help you maintain it and maintain the standards that are expected of your project. So lesson number 1, understand your responsibility as an open source contributor, have next of kin, and allow others to maintain it. Don't rely just on yourself. Next, if you are someone who uses a popular open source library, help the contributors maintain it. Your help in reviewing the pull requests, in looking at the code, understanding the code, proofreading documentation, adding improvements is very helpful. If you find a bug, it would be very helpful for you to fix it, and open source contributors really appreciate. My favorite when I was working on my project was when the bug report came, it came with, here's this PR. So this, you don't always have to open the PR, but at least be out there to help and to help open source contributors help you. So lesson number 2, make it easier for creators to offer you their product. So how do you get that great idea for your open source project? A lot of us, and I was one of them, had an excuse of not contributing to open source because I didn't have the great idea that will turn the world upside down and that will, I don't know, get me famous or something. I didn't have one, but you don't have to have one. What you need is just work on your frustration. Something frustrates you, that's your open source idea. Something you do repeatedly, that's your open source idea. Fix the problems that bother you, fix the problems that you see need to be fixed, and the great idea will eventually come. You can always start with fixing bugs, build features, proofreading documentation, and most importantly, don't contribute just for the sake of contributions. Make it meaningful. Open source is a lot about communications, and the communication protocols are very important to avoid the back and forth communication which could be integrated into your project. For example, always have templates for bug reports and the features. Have a checklist which engineers need to go through before opening that pull request. Whether they run unit tests, they run integration tests, they have added documentation, like that. Don't let anyone mess with your protected branches. Don't let anyone push to your developer or main. Don't mess with server. Server is important. Don't break your users. And what I found personally very helpful is to have labels on your issues. Issues or feature requests have labels because they're really helpful in terms of the effort it would take to contribute to that particular issue. So ease your communications with protocols. It will save you a lot of time and will give you a lot more time working on your features instead of resolving simple questions. Learn from your contributors. When you put your project out, it's there for everyone else's judgment. And a lot of time, people will come with better ideas that you wish you thought of yourself. And that might hurt your ego, but that's part of learning. You look at the proposed solutions and see what you can learn from it. Appreciate your contributors. If they proposed a great idea, let them implement it. Thank them in your READMEs and release notes, and build relationships with them, because they might be that person that you need to help you build out that idea that you have. Give credit for their good thoughts. Occasionally, you would have people trying to contribute to your open source that wouldn't be as nice. They will come and demand that the bug be fixed right now, or else, whatever else is. And they might refactor your code and decide that that's a better way for your library to work. And you might not agree with it because that was not your intention. There is always an option for them to fork or start something better. Don't let them bully you into doing things that you don't want. Listen to them, but be firm and respectful. So, lesson number 6, don't let anybody grind you down. And lesson number 7, don't let the imposter syndrome hold you back. Very often we don't act because we don't think we're good enough. It's very hard if you had a tough day at work, you opened the PR, you received about a dozen comments, your build failed, something went into production and it broke, and it was your bug. So what? We all have bad days. Let's learn from our mistakes, and let's let it not get us to stop. Imposter syndrome is real for a lot of people, and let's take this as a learning opportunity. And let's put those projects out there. The first one might not be the best one, but the more you do it, the better it's gonna get. And lesson number 7, don't let the imposter syndrome hold you back. So to sum up, lesson number 1, understand your responsibility as an open source contributor. Lesson number 2, as someone who uses popular library, give back. Lesson number 3, don't wait for the great idea, start small, build features, fix bugs. Lesson number 4 is communications with protocols. Lesson number 5, learn from your contributors. Lesson number 6, don't let anybody grind you down. And lesson number 7, don't let the imposter syndrome hold you back. So what's next for SQSLite? And if my talk has inspired you, which I really hope, You're welcome to start contributing with my project, and I do need help too. Something I'm looking to do for SQSLite is to build user interface where you don't always have to use it as a CLI tool. You can actually see what things are working visually. I also need to add data persistence so we can save the progress and resume the next day. Right now, when the server is closed, the data is gone. And what I'm personally working on is increasing adoption and talking about my project and hoping that I can get your eyes on it and get me to help improve the project that I have and to improve my open source offering. So please don't be shy. If you're looking forward to contribute, I'm very happy to help if you've never done this before and sort of teach you what I have learned. And I don't claim to be an expert, but I can teach you what I know, and maybe you can teach me something later that you know. And thank you for coming to my talk. Welcome to connect with me. I'm on GitHub, Twitter, and you're welcome to send me an email. And some special thanks for people who have contributed to my project and helped me and guided me, and some of the people I have mentored who also have contributed to the projects. Most of them were junior engineers. And there are always some great tweets that I find on Twitter, so that's some special credits too. Oh, that's it. And any questions, I would be happy to answer. Yes. So I did once, did not notice merge conflict, and I have released that in a patch. What I did is, in NPM, you cannot really take back what you did. So I had to essentially just create a new version, a new patch, and there's nothing you can do at that point. The mistake has been made, the history has been written. We take the lesson that we have learned and we try not to do it again. And I don't have that many people that use it right now, and the mistake was noticed right away, which helped. And essentially, I never heard anyone complaining. So, thank you. Any more questions I can answer? Yes. I can try. I mean, this idea started, and Edgardo gave me the idea. Edgardo is my mentor and engineering manager. He encouraged me to build this. And what's next is up to my imagination and the commitment that I would have to my new project. There's still a lot of work to work on this one, but I'm not stopping on where I am. If you have a great idea, I would love to hear from you. If you see there is a need and you need someone to build it, I would be happy to hear the idea and explore if that's the idea I want to build. Or if you would like to build it, I would be happy to contribute. Any more? Yes? It's hard to remember. I think the first time I had to add something to open source it was a popular library that I was using. I don't recall the name at this point. It was something that the library did not offer. So it was a feature that I needed for my for the project I was working on. So I essentially found the need and opened the issue, opened the PR, and contributed to that project. And that feature is still there. Any more questions? No? Thank you very much for coming, and I'll be happy to answer any questions later during the day while I'm still here. Thank you.